item is the consent agenda. Those items are considered routine and are adopted by one motion unless any board member or the superintendent requests that an item be removed. And I do believe we want to do that this evening.
Yes, I'd like to move the student transportation services contract.
Okay, then we'll put that under new business. With that modification, I just need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. All in, wait.
I have some
any
retirements
discussion? Okay,
Retirements to recognize this evening. The Board of Education expresses sincere appreciation to the following for their service and devotion to this community and its schools. David Lawrence for his 31 years of service, Lori Friedman for her 13 years of service, Julie Green for her 17 years of service, and Keith Myrick for his 18 years of service. Thank you to all of those individuals.
Thank you, Shannon. Okay, any discussion on the remaining items? Seeing none. Janice?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and then next is the report of the President of the Board of Education. And I did want to thank all of the legislators and candidates for the legislature who came out this morning to a summit here hosted in our district office that the Kansas Associations of School Boards put on, providing an update on just school finance in general and a variety of legislative issues that are facing public schools in Kansas. It was really informational. The discussions that were had in the event were really good, and I heard from several currently elected legislators who felt like they got a lot of good information that they feel prepares them for going back to session, which is always good to know. So, and thank you, Shannon, as well, for attending, and Dr. Dole, but it's your job, so never mind. Okay, so then I believe you don't have a report this evening, so we'll move on to board commentary. I know Shannon had something.
I do. I just wanted to update the board, actually. On our consent agenda, you noticed that we had a number of board policies up for their first reading. You may have noticed that what was not included in those policies was any revisions related to the discussion we've been having surrounding the Confederate flag and those kinds of symbols in our schools. The policy committee has had a great deal of discussion about that. We have met with some students that were involved in coming to speak to the board, and we have crafted some language. We decided that we weren't quite ready to bring it to the board for a first reading. We have gathered input from our students, and we wanted to gather input from our staff. So we've put it out there. We're in the process of gathering that input, and once we've gathered input, where Vanessa and I will be meeting again with David as the policy committee, and we will have some further discussion about the input we receive and whether we need to make further modifications to some of the language that has been suggested, and then I think at that point then we'll be ready to bring something to the board for discussion. But we didn't want to rush that because we felt like that input from staff was really, really important on this issue. So anyway, just wanted to update you as to why that didn't appear on our agenda, because we had some discussion that we thought it might be ready at this point, and it's just not quite ready.
Thank you, Shannon, for that update. Any other board commentary? Okay, then our first report this evening is a report about USD 497 mental health services, and for that we have Kevin Harrell and Jose Cornejo.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Harrell, Director of Student Services and Special Education. Our board, one of the board goals really talked about supporting our district and our teachers in the CI3T process. In the CI3T process, we look at the academic, behavioral, and social-emotional needs of students. Tonight, we're going to talk about the social-emotional or the mental health needs of our students. For several years now, we've heard from our staff and our building administrators that there's a lot going on with our students, and it seems more and more issues, and we weren't seen to be prepared to address those issues. In 2014, the board kind of responded to that and approved the hiring of Jose Cornejo as the mental health facilitator for the district. And this is not just a Lawrence issue. And working with the Kansas City districts, I ran into a superintendent from Indiana this is a big thing, and I don't have answers of why it's happening. Everyone has their ideas, but Lawrence Public School has really looked into meeting those needs of the students. So tonight we're going to talk about what's happening in Lawrence, the things we've done to work with students and support our teachers, and then some of the things that we run into.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Jose, the mental health facilitator for the district, and I just want to share with you some things that we're doing in the district. Is this up? So all 21 of our buildings have mental health teams in each building. And those mental health teams are there to look at the needs of their building, to be there to support their staff and to educate their staff on what are the mental health needs of their building, but also to provide supports and interventions for the students that are referred to those mental health teams when they have students within those buildings that are exhibiting behaviors, either socially, emotionally, or mental, that require additional support so that they can be engaged and be successful academically. Some of the benefits we see from the mental health teams in our buildings, it allows us to collaborate with the teachers, but it also allows us to collaborate with service providers in our community, whether that be Bird Nash, the Heartland Community Health Center, or some of the private providers in our community, so that we can help families link their children to the services that provide the supports that the student needs that we may not be able to provide within our building. We provide crisis intervention, but some of the students need more interventions that require more of a therapeutic approach that need to be conducted by a professional licensed therapist within our community, things that we can't provide on a daily basis in our schools. So we are linking our mental health interventions to the CI3T model. And so we look at the Tier 1, where we're looking at prevention strategies that allow us to get into classrooms and educate kids on some interventions that help all students. We also use our positive action social skill curriculum to teach all kids these social emotional character development skills that are also linked to the state so that they are getting the skills so that they can learn to cooperate, how to advocate for themselves, how to collaborate with their peers when they're working on particular projects. In the secondary schools, we're using the Connect with Kids video curriculum that's facilitated by their teachers, classroom teachers, where they watch videos on specific subjects, and then they have classroom discussions, and then teachers have the ability to take those discussions further and maybe do some classroom projects that helps those kids tie it into maybe some of their social peer groups that they're working with on strategies, but also use it amongst their peers so that they develop supports with their peers, but also within the building using that curriculum. We also look at some prevention education strategies at the Tier 1 level, where we as our mental health teams can get into classrooms and teach kids some strategies to cope with the stress or the anxieties that we hear about in the district. In a review in our district mental health survey that we did last year, we discovered that anxiety was a big issue within our district. And so we have, in the last year and a half, done lots of trainings on anxiety to help our teachers understand what anxiety is, but also some strategies that they can use in the classroom. But also our mental health professionals get in there and teach kids breathing exercises, some stress reduction strategies that they can use to help reduce the anxiety, but also they can use those same interventions when they prepare to take a test or they're at home and they don't understand something, where they can just calm themselves down and relax. The other things we've done is we've gone in and worked with kids on suicide intervention. We go into the freshman health classes and talk to kids about suicide, but also this last year we trained about 50 high school students on yellow ribbon suicide prevention so that those kids can be advocates within their building. If they see their peers are struggling, they know where to refer them to student services so that we can intervene and help those kids manage whatever's stressing them out, or link them to the services so that they get the support that they need within the school. So we look at the tier, everything we do is either Tier 1 or Tier 2 in our mental health, and some of the other things we've done at the Tier 2 level is we've used the positive action curriculum and created Tier 2 interventions that are linked to the positive action curriculum so that when kids go to those groups and are getting those additional supports at the Tier 2 level, they can take that information and transfer it back to the classroom and relate it to the lessons that the teachers are teaching them related to positive action. We also link some of our interventions to the student improvement plans so that there's a consistency between what the mental health teams are doing and what some of the teachers are drawing up for the behavior plans with the kids. It also allows us to consult with parents to share with them some of the things that we're doing in schools so that maybe they can integrate some of those interventions at the home. And then at the Tier 3 level, it's more individualized, where we try to provide some supports for kids on an individual basis. And in our secondary schools, we have the RAP program, and next year we'll have RAP in 6 of our elementary schools. So we'll be able to utilize the RAP program to provide some of those individualized interventions with those kids, but at the same time not lose focus that we also need to be linking those kids with outside resources in the community as well if Bird-Nash does not meet the family needs at that time. So some of our district providers, as you probably know, we have our school psychologists, our counselors, and our school social workers that primarily make up the mental health team. Along with our RAP workers, they also attend our mental health team so that they are also involved in some of the decision processes on interventions and students that are being referred to the mental health teams. We continue to collaborate with a variety of agencies locally and in the Kansas City area. We also have been collaborating with KU Child and Family Clinic. They developed an anxiety curriculum for Lawrence Public Schools that we can use in our schools, and it was written so that teachers can use it in the classroom. So that's additional resources that they have provided us. Some of the district things that we've done this last year is we've come up with some imminent danger protocols for our district administrators to use when there's a threat within our buildings. We've developed a mental health reintegration plan so that those students who are hospitalized in our district have an opportunity to meet with our mental health professionals and to develop safety plans so that we can provide the supports and services that they need so that their transition back to school is safe and successful. We also, again, use the mental health survey to get feedback from our teachers in terms of things that they're seeing in their buildings and using that information to implement interventions, but also to provide professional development for our staff. Current staff, as I said, we have our social workers, our counselors, and our high school, our school psychologists in all the buildings. Some of the challenges that we continue to face in our school district is access to mental health services for all of our students. Some of our families just cannot afford the services that are out there, even with the sliding fees that are offered. So we are continually looking at providers in our community that can meet those needs for those families and those individuals. Students presenting more intense needs, and how do we address those needs? So we're continually looking at our interventions and figuring out what can we do to help those students so that they're engaged and successful in school. Helping families navigate the various systems within the mental health system, which can be complex for families, especially in times of crisis. And then also across the district, implementing the CI3T process with fidelity, making sure that all teachers are teaching the proper amount of lessons so that those kids at the Tier 1 level are getting the social skill curriculum that they need, so that when we, as mental health professionals, are intervening, we know that the kids have received X amount of lessons and understand some of the concepts that we might be working with them on in groups or individually. And then keeping a focus on the whole child and not losing focus that some kids may need social emotional needs before they can meet their academic needs. So thinking ahead, we'll continue to systematically look at interventions from the mental health side, continue expanding our professional development for our mental health professionals and for our teachers, and then also trying to look at how do we get more parents engaged in the mental health services that we provide in schools so that those services also can be translated back at the home. These are just some of the professional developments that we have done the last couple of years. We've had about 90 district staff go through mental health first aid provided by Bert Nash. Starting this year, we are making sure that all of our social workers and counselors are getting annual mandated reporting training. We've done managing, acting out behavior trainings for our teachers and our mental health staff. And again, we've done the yellow ribbon suicide prevention for our high schools. And this coming year, we plan to do that training with our middle schools so that we're continually training and educating kids on suicide prevention. And then they'll just continually feed the high school and hopefully continue to have a support group there for their peers. So that's all I have in terms of the mental health report. Thank you for your time.
Any questions?
I know there was some legislation that was passed this session on
Jason Platt Act?
Yes.
Yes.
How does that mesh with what we are already doing? Or are we waiting on the state board to do some regulation writing to implement
We as a
that?
district annually do suicide prevention training for our mental health professionals, and then those professionals go back into their buildings and do suicide training. What will change a little bit is the time that the state is going to mandate. So before school is out, we sent a memo out to all the administrators to update their suicide building plans and to have them ready to submit to us by the beginning of the school year. And then once the state defines how the content of that training, what it'll look like, that will help us a lot in terms of how we design that training for each one of our buildings.
Okay, but it was already something we were doing, so
Correct.
it's not going to be
No.
a huge change.
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So I had a question about the yellow ribbon student peer group. Has that been successful? And also, are there supports in place for the students that are doing that work?
Yeah, we had Meg Lyles, who was the prevention specialist coordinating at Free State, and she is going to be a social worker next year for us and also be at Free State, and she's agreed to continue being the supervisor for that group. And then at Lawrence High, we'll have to find a new counselor to coordinate that group because the counselor that was is leaving the district. But yes, they do have support, and they get together with those kids, once every 2 months or so, just to check in with them to see what supports that they need.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the LGBTQ components update related to the task force that was put together. And for that, we have Lindsay Buck.
I'm good. I'm just reading my script.
Thank you.
Arla Jones is handing out a copy of who the task force consists of and their role. Also at the bottom are the various secondary LGBTQ clubs throughout the district. Good evening. My name is Lindsay Buck. I'm a special education department chair and case manager at Lawrence High, and where I also co-sponsor the Total Equality Alliance, which is our LGBTQ club there. I'm the mother of two students in the district, and I'm here tonight as a member of the district's task force. I joined the task force not only because I'm a sponsor of an LGBTQ club, but as an out lesbian staff member, I'm also a proud part of the LGBTQ community myself. I want to begin by thanking the board for adopting the LGBTQ goal last year. We've spent several years looking at ways in which we can close the achievement gap based on race and color, and so I applaud you all for taking it a step further and tasking the district with looking at ways in which we can better meet the needs of our LGBTQ youth. Over the course of this last year, Dr. Dole met approximately once a month with members of the task force, many of which are here tonight. Consisted of district staff, teachers, parents, administrators, and community members. We spent the year investigating topics related to LGBTQ students. Furthermore, Dr. Dole and President Sanborn met with the Total Total Equality Alliance at Lawrence High to hear directly from the students themselves about the challenges they face. Here is what we've identified so far. In terms of facilities, transgender and gender nonconforming students report anxiety regarding access to bathrooms. Gender-neutral bathrooms must be a priority in all school settings. Locker rooms are also an issue, and not only for our trans and gender nonconforming students. Communal dressing rooms and showers present potential problems with bullying and harassment. Students report skipping PE class and/or not showering to avoid this issue. All students should feel safe and should be able to take a PE class without fear and anxiety. This challenge can be resolved for all students if more private changing areas and private showers were provided. And something to note, the Office of Civil Rights has maintained the right of transgender students to use the bathroom and locker room of the gender of which they identify. In terms of cafeteria spaces, this can also be a hot spot for bullying and harassment. Students with high levels of anxiety report feeling uncomfortable in large, open cafeteria spaces. Some will ask teachers if they can eat in their classrooms. It would be worth looking at creative ways in which students could have options for eating in smaller, less stressful spaces. The next area to address is curriculum. Our LGBTQ youth report that they rarely see themselves in their books and their classroom topics. The district might consider using the racial equity rubric as a model for evaluating the inclusion of LGBTQ resources in the classroom. Students report that they would like these topics to be embedded in the curriculum as a natural part of the narrative. While improvements have certainly been made with the new sex education and health standards, the district must continue in this area as it relates to our LGBTQ youth and education on the sex and health issues that they must be aware of. Lastly, in the area of curriculum, the district might start to broaden their thoughts on gendered music groups, for example, women's choir and men's choir. This is problematic for our trans and gender nonconforming students in terms of dressing requirements and which choir they are put into. Students should be able to join the choir that their voice allows, regardless of gender. With regards to LGBTQ resources, our district mental health teams must be educated on LGBTQ issues and etiquette. This is especially important in terms of suicide prevention. While the mental health first aid class offered through Burton Ash is a great start, we need to continue these efforts. Library and media centers also need to increase resources related to LGBTQ topics. Maybe the most important topic next to bathrooms is the issue of professional development for staff members. Students report over and over again that they wish their teachers and staff members had more knowledge of LGBTQ topics, issues, terminology, and preferred pronouns, and so on. While some staff members do have a basic understanding, either because they are LGBTQ themselves or they have someone close to them that is, we need to consider to expand awareness through thoughtful professional development for everyone in the district. Furthermore, school activities should be evaluated around gender binary issues. For example, homecoming king and queen, gendered sports teams, and gendered games at post-prom, for example. Lastly, in the issue of gender, or lastly in this specific area, is the issue of gender on Skyward. If a trans student and their parents both wish to have the student's gender identification on Skyward changed, this should be a quick and easy fix, which hasn't always been the experience of our trans youth. The final area identified by the task force is student awareness. We must continue to educate on LGBTQ issues. Bullying must not be tolerated, and this goes for all students regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. Our LGBTQ clubs throughout the secondary schools must continue to be supported, and the district might consider ways in which our elementary LGBTQ youth can better be supported as well. Many members of the task force are happy to continue this important work moving forward. In the wake of yesterday's events in Orlando, our LGBTQ youth need to know now, more than ever, that school is a safe place for them. They need to know that they're supported and loved, and they need to know that their lives matter. Thank you again, all of you. And thank you to my fellow task force members for all of your work this year. I would now like to open it up to the board to ask the task force members who are present any questions you might have.
Thank you. So first, I do want to thank you all for participating. I think this is an issue that we care deeply about, and are glad that people were willing to come together and talk about how we can improve. Any questions? So I think we have goal setting session again in August this year, where we basically will take this input and then infuse that into future goals. And so I think that's kind of the next steps. You have a comment, and I think you're formulating a question, so yeah.
I just have a question, a follow-up about the Skyward situation. Anecdotally, what types of things are you hearing about?
For example, a student. So, for example, a student, a trans student, it was female to male, and the parents and the student both advocated to have that little F changed to an M. And I don't know exactly what the issue was, but that student went almost, graduated December, so went a whole half of a year still being labeled as female when he is male. So that, and we've talked a little bit about that.
We have addressed that. I think that historically that's absolutely true, so I don't want to take away from that. I think what Lindsay said is absolutely true, but we have made a decision in-house. Gets a little tricky with a minor when the parent doesn't want, so we have to be careful there, but certainly with a child or a young adult who's 18 and younger, if the parents say, okay, we have made the decision that we will do that.
I think that my question really related to the Skyward issue as relates to how students are addressed in the classroom, and I was wondering, that's really more of kind of a detail thing, but that's I'd be interested in knowing more about how we can address that, because that seems like one of those things that kids get asked all the time. Do you have a name that you go by? And so if we're not, why is that an issue, I guess, that we're not able to accommodate?
One thing we had kind of talked about is just kind of a communication, and I think that goes along with staff professional development, is kind of a communication protocol. So a teacher might start the class by handing out little information cards so that they can write, what name do you go by, or what name do you want me to use, or those kinds of things could help a lot, I think. Does that help answer your question?
And Shannon, I think it's fair to say, and Lindsay, I think you're absolutely right on with professional development. So I think that adults fall in a couple of categories. One is they just don't know, and they're just not sensitive. And they don't know. And then, unfortunately, I think we have some adults who do know and choose not to treat them as an individual student. And I think most of it is because adults just don't know. And from a professional development standpoint, they need to learn. And then they need to call the student by what the student desires to be called. And it's as simple as that, but we have a lot of teachers, and that professional development piece is very, very, very important.
Mm-hmm. And then I think I just wanted to make a comment in regard to the facility issues that you raised. It is something that I sit on the facilities committee along with Marcel Harmon, who's not here this evening, but it is something that we've started talking about. Mm-hmm. It's already been on our radar, but I appreciate that feedback from the group that is something that's important. Yep.
Right, and some gender-neutral bathrooms exist at some of the elementary facilities that had updates in the last bond. So, yeah, I do think that is something we're anxious to tackle from a facility improvement stand. Mm-hmm. Do you get the sense, and I know you're a teacher and a sponsor, so you interface with a lot of kids, and some of you may as well, but when students have concerns, so like we have really robust anti-discrimination policy that says we want this to be a safe place for you. We want you to feel like you can be exactly who you are, and that teachers will respect that, et cetera. When that isn't ideal, do you get the sense that students have a place where they can go in order to make a complaint and then they're heard? And it seems like from the report that wasn't an issue we needed to address. So is that being handled appropriately?
I feel like with the addition or the expansion of having GSAs at all secondary schools, I feel like it is. I think that most students feel like they know someone they can go to. And I also think that through networking with all of us throughout the district, if someone doesn't feel like, they have that support, they can, for example, I had a student contact me from Free State and say, they wanted to, talk a little bit more. The parents were concerned, and for whatever reason, that student, wanted to look at, other places to attend school or, places to talk. And we actually had that student at one of our task force meetings talking about some of the challenges. So I think it's worth looking at strengthening safe spaces, maybe having more visible. Well, I feel like a lot of our classrooms and teachers we have a lot of safe space stickers and teachers and staff members that support that. But again, I think through professional development, we can make that even, expand even further and just having awareness throughout all the staff members.
Great. Thank you. Jessica.
So is professional development around this issue something that needs to be developed, or are we currently, has there been any professional development so far?
So we've had some. I think we have plenty of local experts that can help us develop the professional development we need. Plus there are, and the task force identified some school districts that have developed some more concrete professional development plans. I don't know, but my sense is that we've got people locally that can provide us with the expertise to develop those professional development activities. It is a matter of time, always, and so you just have to make it a priority. And from a goal-setting standpoint, again, I think that's one of the things that you can direct the school district to do.
My understanding is that professional development has been offered in the past for secondary teachers, in a kind of a wheel. You get to sign up for a certain number of sessions. And, I think probably teachers that most need professional development in this area might not self-select that as the course that they want to take. And that might be part of the problem. And so figuring out as a district, as if this is a goal and how we want to make sure that the staff that really might need some development in this area get what they need to support our students might be a benefit.
Because you think about the Beyond Diversity training.
Right.
I mean, a similar LGBTQ kind of training, I think, would be worthwhile.
Right. If you're uncomfortable talking about white privilege, you're not going to say, ooh, I want to sign up for that class.
Right,
exactly.
right.
So I do think that we have tackled this, so we have some skills that we can use in order to be able to have these conversations and make sure that, we do a better job.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Vanessa, I would like to personally thank the task force and also say that to people that I learned so much from the task force. I mean, there were lots and lots of things that I didn't learn. And one of the things that I have learned from my equity training is that you just ask the question. I mean, the whole pronoun thing was absolutely and completely new to me. And so before we go to our adults and say, by golly, you got to call them by the right pronoun, you have to instruct. You have to tell them this is the proper protocol. So I appreciate the task force, and Arla and I go way back in terms of Arla helping me get a group together for a KU class. So this has just been a really good adventure for me, a really nice journey, and I really want to thank everybody that helped us get this far, and hope you'll continue to push.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, next we have some really good news. We have a legislative and school finance update with Kyle Hayden. Yeah, you all should leave. This isn't good news. I'm kidding.
They didn't come for this?
You're going to have to start bringing some good news, or else, you're going to lose your audience.
Somebody else gets to start doing this here pretty soon. So Kyle Hayden, Assistant Superintendent of Business and Operations, here to give a legislative school finance update. I have some associates here, Dave Cunningham, Director of HR, Kathy Johnson, Director of Finance to help, and some other HR staff here who have dug into this issue for the last probably several months. So for over 5 months, at least since February, we've been waiting for the legislature and the governor to provide us with a solid school finance plan, and that would be satisfactory to the state Supreme Court, and we're still waiting. To give a little history, I put a lot into the board enclosure just to kind of explain more for the public than for anybody. But if we're going back to February, the Kansas Supreme Court charged the legislature with fixing the equity portion of the school finance block grant, essentially, that was enacted in 2015. The legislature passed and the governor signed a new bill, and the court then revisited that, took that up in early May, and determined that the capital outlay portion was equitable. And with that plan, actually, the school district would receive a little over $650,000 in additional state aid that we didn't have before. So that was a good piece. But the local option budget piece was deemed unsatisfactory. So now the legislature has been called back into session beginning June 23rd by Governor Brownback, and we hope that they're able to come up with a solution rather quickly. The state Supreme Court has said that they made the statement is not necessarily that they would close schools, but that money could not be raised, distributed, or spent under an unconstitutional system. So that leaves us in a little bit of a quandary, and so we've been, it hasn't been just a knee-jerk reaction for our staff. They've been thinking about this for quite some time, and the what-ifs if we got to this point, and as of July 1, we could no longer pay employees, we could no longer pay our bills. There's a lot of ramifications, obviously, to that, and bond construction, facility improvement projects that aren't part of bond construction, but just the ripple effect, mainly just to our staff and their families, and just the negative impact that could cause to our community. So there's a lot of things there that we've been chewing on, and so like I said, I have Kathy and Dave here to talk a little bit about specifics as it relates to some of their areas, which particularly HR, talk about how we would pay people, how we intend to pay people, their benefits, and how they've done some work with our insurance companies to make sure that would stay intact. And then Kathy can talk a little bit about school finance. And I think the biggest issue that I want to relay to the board tonight is that we can't really even sacrifice a day when it comes to getting ready for school. And every single day that we were to shut down operationally from a district perspective, whether it's our financial office, our HR office, our facilities and operations, our technology office, every single day will cost us something in getting prepared for mid-August. So the ramifications are felt immediately, even if people don't work. So I'll let them talk about specifics and allow you to ask them some questions.
Thanks, Dave Cunningham, Director of HR. Just as a kind of an example, we made a strategic decision based on a board goal of integrating our software to bring our benefit enrollment in-house. The system had a module. There's some development on that module that will occur, and then we'll begin to work with our employees to actually do our online enrollment in-house. We had historically used a third-party provider and spent money on that every year, so this is a positive move. But if we're not at the office to finish the development, then it delays the open enrollment. Fortunately, one of the things we were doing in terms of solutions is to address a number of questions or things related to some of the areas of that enrollment system that were not preferred. We're looking at passive enrollment, which means if I have benefits in this fiscal year, I'm going to have benefits in next fiscal year, but they'll be the same. And so if, for example, we're not at work to finish that project, then we'll finish it when we get back. Everybody will still have insurance. We'll do a passive enrollment. They can make changes at a later point. And prior to September 1 plan year date. So we've been thinking about, all right, what are we going to do if we're not paying premium? So we've talked with health insurance, dental, vision, so forth, and we've got extensions on grace periods so that if we don't actually have the capacity to go out and pay for health insurance or dental insurance, they're not going to stop paying claims. So it's going to work fairly seamlessly. Likewise, with some of the other aspects of HR and dealing with our classified employees, we know that we can get them paid by the end of the month for the work they performed through June 24. The work performed after June 24, there's a little bit of a window in there that's a bit problematic. But with our teachers, we will be able to run all of the payrolls and have them ready to push out before the end of the month, depending on how the special session goes. So compensation through pretty much the end of June for classified, for our teachers will be taken care of. We've had a fairly precipitous uptick in the request for balance of contract, which people will then get all 3 paychecks in June. So we would need to look at maybe an option of whether we want to force the balance of contract so that everyone is assured of getting all of their compensation for the year that has ended. So a couple of things like that, but we'll be positioned to do whatever we need to do. So those are the primary HR. All of our new hire kinds of things are continuing. We'll schedule those events and so forth. We'll be prepared to do that. Don't anticipate any major disruption in some of those things. Just may have to retool a little bit. So having people in place, all of the paperwork done, and have them ready to go in August for school starting should not be a major issue. So we've had some time to think through the issues and come up with solutions for the various challenges that are potentially confronting us. And I feel comfortable that while we're going to lose productivity if we're not here, regardless of what area you're talking about, we'll be able to pick that right back up as soon as we're back. So that's from the HR perspective, kind of that overview of some of the planning we've been doing to address this.
So I just tried to summarize on a couple slides some things specific to finance, and then I have some cash balance information, some things to kind of share a little bit of information for year end. The board enclosure shows a lot of things on the back page, very high level, all our summer activities, all the things that we do during the summer, not only extending education, but also, construction and all the different kinds of things. That's our really focal point and is really the busiest time of year, not just for the business office, but for all the operations side, because that's our, the facility's chance to get in the buildings and do all that stuff, to deep clean, get classrooms flipped, all the different kinds of things. In the business office, it's our year end, so everything financial obviously comes through the business office at some point, whether it's bills or payroll. But we're closing down financials, establishing fiscal records for the next year. We still have to prepare for audits. We still have to complete as much of the budget prep as we can do, related documents, so once the court decision is made, all those things can fall into place. It's already a very short 2 to 3, 4 week time frame. It'll just condense it even more. We're starting to hear some concerns from our vendors about not getting paid or wanting to cancel orders because they don't want to lose money by ordering with us, and yet, what do they do? So they're all getting a little nervous. We have contractors that are, if they're delayed payments, they have an obligation to pay their subcontractors, so it's flipping to them some business cash flow float, their own monies to help float to pay those subcontractors timely since we can't pay them. So that's putting a burden on some of those vendors and contractors. Payroll, as Dave mentioned, we have 25% of our budget is really spent in the last 10 days of June on our teacher contracts. We're paying all of their contracts. Their June, July, and August are all charged against this budget year. We have to get all of those processed. We want to make sure they get their payments. So we're doing everything we can to push those early.
make sure everything's in place, that if we had to push a button June 30 to make sure everything got out the door before somebody wasn't there on the 1st, we've spent a lot of time strategically figuring out how we can make that happen. So those are just some things there. I think some things to think about as we get to the June 27th board meeting. There will be some items that we'll have to bring to you depending upon where the court case is to help us make decisions about how we're going to handle some of those very last minute kinds of things, getting permission to go ahead and pay things that are in between board meetings to make sure nobody's left out in the cold, and it'll just be an ongoing till based on what they tell us to do. So I don't know if there's any questions specifically to that, but there's just lots of business that happens in June, July, and August to get things closed out and rolled over.
Mm-hmm. Sorry. Do we have any debt payments that this would affect?
I'll address that here in just a second, but our first debt payment is September 1. So hopefully, and our June 30 cash balance has enough money there to cover that, but then as I talk about cash balances and cash flow, that can potentially be impacted, which is problematic. I suppose the problem about trying to pay it early, we don't have budget authority to pay it. When we published, for the June 30 payment, we don't have budget authority to pay ahead of July 1. We can't republish a levied fund, so we're kind of stuck a little bit, even though we have the cash on hand to do it. So that's just a function of the way that works. Now, that doesn't mean if there really was a panic that we wouldn't try to deal with it, but the state is trying to keep that panic level down and feels like the legislature will do what they need to do when hopefully timely or quickly or quicker than we. So anyway, we have done as a group really talked about how to deal with the things that are coming up upon us. But it is, it's a significant impact on our community, our economic development of our city, since we're the second largest employer. So what happens if we go back to the old funding for the LOB equity, which has been ruled constitutional if it's fully funded? So what does that mean to us if that's something that happens? Part of the reason that it was unconstitutional is that hold harmless piece that allowed districts to even do a bigger discrepancy of a mill levy. And you have districts that have a small mill levy of 610 to 90, to make up some of those differences. So that amount of money that's in our hold harmless is about $1.7 million. And if it was staying in the formula, it was something the board could consider using for new money and raising the mill levy to help fund the gap of state aid. If we go back to the old funding formula, we don't necessarily get any of that new money, so we would lose that hold harmless as far as new money for the board to look at for future. We would have a bit of an increase in the actual state aid in our LOB. If you remember in 14-15 mid-year they cut us, so that level of state aid is what we should have maintained, kept our mill levy fairly flat. When they cut it mid-year, we had to make up for last year, if you recall, a couple mills to offset that loss of state aid. If we go back the other direction, it again funds that same pool of dollars. Nothing's changed in our total. It just means now we have less local to raise and we have state aid, so it's going to do this yo-yo effect to your mill levy. It will be property tax relief is what it'll be for us, but it will not give us any new dollars. So that's sort of what that. And that is sort of the direction that I think people would like to see them do, make it a quick resolution. It does cost some money. And so what does that mean? Where does the money come from? A couple of things that they've talked about as sources of helping fund that deficit are two things that could have a side impact to Lawrence if they chose to do that. One is they've set aside that extraordinary fund that would allow districts with significant enrollment growth or decrease in their assessed valuation to possibly apply for some additional funding outside the block grant. If they use some of those funds or reduce that fund, then not just Lawrence, but any district that has significant growth or loss of valuation would lose the ability to maybe gain some dollars, but flip it instead to fund the equalization is an option for them to consider. The other one that's being thrown out around a little bit is reducing the virtual education per pupil amount. So instead of raising it to the $5,600 that it was scheduled to be raised to, and what we've considered some possible new dollars for us, they would leave it at the $5,000 and keep the decrease at the $1,700. So where we were looking at about a $290 some odd dollar increase that could again help us with future, it would actually be a decrease of about 218, so it kind of swings significantly the other way. So those are some things that have been thrown around. Well, they can fund it, going back to the old formula, if they do a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this. And these are two pieces that have been discussed that could have then a different impact to us. So really anything being discussed is kind of taking some money away from us, both in the LOB, going back to the old formula, and if they use some of these things. We kind of get a couple double whammies with that. Any questions related to that? Some of this is kind of just floated around. I don't think there's been any real decision about what direction, but this is just some things that are kind of important to us keep in mind because it'll change that budget plan a little bit, possibly. The other thing that I wanted to just kind of go over is cash flow. As Kyle mentioned at the very beginning in the board enclosure, their comment is that it's an unconstitutional and you can't raise, distribute, or spend money. Well, one of the things that's real important to know is the state doesn't distribute to us all of our June money by the end of June. There is a chunk of June money that they wait and send it to us in July so they make sure their cash balances look okay. And every district in their general fund has a negative cash balance as of June 30 because of this delay of payment. For us, you can kind of look at the history. In 13-14, it looks like a lot less. And then last year, it raises to the 11, and then this year. And that's because the 20 mills that the state now sends to, or the counties now have to send to the state, is state aid instead of taxes to us directly. So the change in state aid is not difference in money, it's just difference in what they call it. But that being said, you can see the difference in the amount of money we get in July. So we would have been getting that tax distribution in June 5th, and then they would have only delayed a $2.5 million. Well, now that they're doing that, and it's called state aid, it increases that whole June state aid payment to us, and it also increases the amount they delay to us as a little over $4 million, which is significant. So what happens if we don't get that money? Because let's say the courts say you can pay bills, but just whatever you got in your coffers, that's what you've got. Well, every general fund in the state's going to be in the hole, and their LOBs are going to somewhat be right there at the bottom. So what do? Well, we have to be able to pay it out of some other fund, and a lot of those funds are very much reserved for other purposes. We do have our contingency reserve, about 6.6 right now, but we were looking at probably having to spend by the end of the year, because of our deficit spending, a couple million of that. Well, that just kind of ekes right there at that $4 million mark, and maybe we break even. We do have cash in the bank. The cash in the bank is reserved for very specific things, and we'll have close to $45 million or so in the bank, but it's bond construction. It's our bond and interest payment that you're talking about. And so when you look at that, bond and interest will have $14 million, but that's reserved for my mortgage. So that would be paying gasoline for your car out of your mortgage escrow at the bank. You know, it's using it for the wrong purpose. We have some money in our construction fund. That's all for bonds. You know, there's $19 million there. 18 of it's encumbered. It's against the wrong thing. That would be like buying groceries out of my construction loan fund. You know, it's not what we're allowed to do. But if push comes to shove, that's where those cash flow pieces will have to cover us till we get through this timing. We potentially will have a statutory violation if, in fact, some of this falls out, because we've had to use funds in the wrong place to make it bridge.
And what's the real consequence of that? We get a negative note on our audit?
You'll get a note in the audit. It'll also impact our Moody's rating. So when they come and review your financial situation, where your balances are, and what you've had to do to deal with the state finance, and as you know, the state already has a negative outlook kind of already attached to it. So as districts fall into this and can't either make payroll, because unlike other districts, we actually do have some flexibilities, you're going to see some that are even going to look worse. And so every bond, anything that's coming down the road, not only is the state impacting, but how we handle or can handle this. So those violations on your audit report are something that they look at, bond investors look at. So if they're looking to buy your bonds, they're going to look for your financials. They're going to look to see what your issues are and if you're going to make your bond payments so that you can, in fact, get their return on investment. So we have those pots of money to be able to cover and cross the year end, but they will not be set aside for the right purpose. So, those are things we wanted to make you kind of aware of today. June 27th is probably where hopefully we'll know a little bit. Maybe we won't, but we'll have to make some final decisions before year end, possibly with some unknowns.
So Kathy, I know, because I've heard, in order to make payroll, in order to pay people by July 1, and for like hourly and non-salaried employees, there's a certain point at which they can't work anymore in order for that processing to happen, in order for them to get paid prior to that deadline. And we have food service employees that are supporting the summer feeding programs. We have facilities that are being used for Boys and Girls Club. It seems like the 23rd for the legislature to meet and begin discussing, and I'm not completely confident they're going to take an hour and figure it out. So I know on the 27th you'll have an update, but I mean, as a board member that cares a lot about these programs and knows, I've had parents call me and say, will Boys and Girls Club stay at Woodlawn during this time, and will the summer feeding program still be available at the library? All of those things are so important to our community, and I want to say, that we'll do what we need to do, but the guidance we're getting is that if it closes, we cannot spend money after July 1st, or?
They have not officially given us exact guidance. And I think that there's a strong feeling from Dale Dennis's office, even Mark Tallman's office, that at some point, if it gets close to this where it just doesn't look like it's going anywhere, that the court would need to kind of fine-tune exactly what this cannot disperse money kind of thing looks like. In writing, on paper, it can be interpreted a lot of different ways. Maybe what they just mean is that the state can't disperse money, which means they can't send it to us. But the money we've already got is money that was dispersed. And, we've been under this unconstitutional system now 2 years because of the way. So we've, will they... So it's kind of hard. So there's some Supreme Court guidance that really does need to happen. And we would hope that maybe they would come in and share some of that. Otherwise, maybe you operate until you're told you can't operate,
right.
With clarification. But even if they do decide something before June 30, the court took almost 2 months to make a decision. So are we in limbo those 2 months, or is it, okay, let's wait and see if it works, so in the meantime you can work, you can function until there's a ruling again? Does it get pushed off enough to just get rolled into adequacy?
I think it's important to note in that regard that the Attorney General did file a request with the court on Friday asking them to lift. I think what he asked was that they lift the order about closing schools, but that filing will give the court an opportunity to do exactly what you're saying, which is to clarify if they choose to do so, what they really mean.
I'm sympathetic. At a certain point, you have to say, we've been asking for you to make this constitutional. Something has to happen. But, the families that will be impacted by not having free lunches available, by not having safe places to put their children over the summer, they've been counting on Boys and Girls Club being there.
It's punishing the wrong people, right?
And it's not the court's fault. But, I think it will be important that we do everything we can, everything within our power, to make it work for our communities and for our families that are counting on those services. And to mow the yards. Are we going to get notices from the city of our... I don't know. There's a lot that has to happen, and I appreciate all of your work. Any other questions? Thanks for staying engaged.
I think mental health.
Right, I know, right. Are the mental health people still here? We need some help. Crisis intervention. Okay, so then finally on our agenda is the transportation contract. So let's...
So did we have a audience comment?
Oh, right, that's on the transportation contract, so we will pull
Oh.
that up first.
Okay.
And then we have our discussion first, and then we'll, yeah. Let's see. It's the third one down, student transportation services contract. So, Rick, yeah, you had a question or a concern or a comment? Or all three?
All the
The
above.
floor is yours.
No, I would just, and I know this information has been presented before, but I just kind of like a reminder, especially in light of this recent, discussion we just had. If we did move to running our own bus system, how much potentially could we save out of operating expenses? And it doesn't have to be an exact number, but just kind of ballpark realistic.
Sure. Ron May, Director of Administrative Services, and I brought the presentation that I did do back in April, and just to jump through, so the proposal that we had from First Student, just as a quick reminder, was 4.69% increase in year one, which is approximately $4.8 million, and then a 3.5% increase each year from years 2 through 5, and then I've shown what that amount would be approximately with those increases. We also had them talk about, in the light of if we were to get our own facility and house the buses, what kind of a discount would we get, and that reflects some of that. What that on the right-hand side shows, we obviously aren't going to have a facility for the first year, so that up front would not be there. When we pulled together these were the operating costs. So if we were to do it in-house, we came up with an amount of about $4.95 million to get things started up. So up front, it would be a little bit more. Down the road, it's hard to say because costs are going to increase, but it was kind of nearly a wash up front, and then down the road it could potentially be a little cheaper, within a couple $100,000 maybe a year. Something else that I wanted to keep in mind, because we knew that we needed a little bit of time to be able to make the decision. I just want to remind, I didn't even show you, when we first asked them about the potential of a one-year contract, that increase was twice that. It was a little over 9%.
But I guess I'm just looking for a number.
Sure.
So what's the most realistic number, say, down the road?
$4.95 million.
So if you remember, Rick, the savings is not in the amount of money it costs. It's the fact that we could use general, or we would alleviate general funds.
And that's what I'm asking.
Okay, there we go. Yeah. So, and that's how I have that broken out. So, operating costs, we would still have to take out of general budget. That's about $4 million, and then the capital costs for fleet lease and facility lease is about $925,000 that could be taken out of capital outlay fund.
So in other words, it's not 4.9 million that you would switch from general fund to capital fund.
No,
it's
it would be
$925,000 a year.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly. And then I think, do you want me to mention do you want to talk about the facilities and operations payroll?
Yeah. So, one of the things we talked about, and actually we built into our budget plan for this next year is, and I just mentioned it earlier, with the equity funding with capital outlay, we received another $650,000 that was unexpected in our capital outlay this year that we have intended to use that money to pay for a good portion of our tradespeople, and thus freeing up additional general fund dollars for all of our other, payroll expenses, instructional supplies, different things like that. So it's one of the ways that we are, shifting how we use our funds in a more flexible way, as we have some increased flexibility with the capital outlay dollars. Now we intend to spend them, but yeah, the difference here, Rick, is it's really about what funds are you using and in what capacity are you using them. So,
and I get that. But, I can get my calculator out here and sort of figure this out. But I guess what I'm just looking for is if we, what's the realistic number we could expect to save down the road? Because so shifting the cost to capital instead of operating cost or general fund.
Well, I think you're looking at that $925,000 is what you're looking at. And the thing that will change for us, though, will be, and it will change a little bit anyway, is, if we purchase this new facility, if we look at a new facility for facilities and operations and for transportation services, there'll be increased operating costs for that. That will be general operating costs. So that, I think you can pretty much bank on the fact that it's going to cost us $750,000 to get buses and to start that, but that would be savings. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So assuming we wanted to move in that direction, we can't do that tomorrow. So what would be a realistic timeline, or at least a sort of best guess about if we decided to go that direction, when could we transition to this?
So I think the first domino for us is going to be the facility. And I think we, as we've talked about that and the potential, within the next several months that we may be able to acquire something that would be able to house something like this along with facilities and operations. If we were to begin at that point, we had put on a timeline of priority one being to build a warehouse, simply because we don't know tomorrow if we're going to have a warehouse. But and so that's our initial priority, and we were hoping to have that, maybe within the first 6 to 9 months after acquiring a new facility, get that constructed. Phase 2 for us would be building new office space for facilities and operations, and then we would have to then, as part of that plan, figure out, okay, is transportation going to be part of that? And we were anticipating, as part of this whole reorganization and purchase, by next October 2017 of having all of that space. I think throughout that, if a decision was made, we would need to go, a key component will be looking at our capital improvement plan for this next year and figuring out really what stays and what goes, and trying to prioritize how that will all work together. I think that another consideration along the way, in tandem with the capital improvement plan, has got to be the master facility plan for our secondary schools, because things will come on or off the capital improvement plan list based on that. So I guess there's a lot of dominoes and things that we'll be looking at throughout the course of this next year that may help answer that. But I think the key component is probably the capital improvement plan, and the board giving us some direction on what are the key things that are going to be priorities, knowing that one-to-one at high school is something it's on the horizon for sure, and putting cost to that, and so.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Remind me of the 6 months. If I can-
Yeah.
So just as a reminder also, if the board were to decide that's the direction we wanted to go, we agreed with First Student there is a 6-month out clause on the whole thing. So again, being able to take the lower rate and have the 6 months to make a decision to get out of the contract if we need to, it is there.
Anything further? Yeah, Jessica.
I guess because I vaguely remember talking about the complications of having the bus drivers, right, and supervising them and hiring them, and any complications that might add. So can we recap that as well?
Well, yeah, it's like anything, we would. I don't have the number. Well, I think I do have it on here. Approximately. Sorry. I want to say we were looking at adding, you'd be adding about 150, there it is, 150 employees. Those are things we can do. Other districts do it. The state does support certification of drivers. Some of the things that First Student has a little more latitude with is the ability, they have their own in-house school. They also are able to give driving bonuses to people who come in with a CDL, as opposed it's not to say we can't do it, but when you don't do it for other employees, then you have to decide, is that a program or a direction we want to take in hiring or trying to retain people. And there are a lot of things we would have to have somebody dedicated to being sure that licenses are up to date, training is done on a monthly basis, that drug tests are taken and passed, and all those kinds of things. And then if you have an accident, then that obviously it would change insurance. But again, these are all costs that are built into what we're paying them for right now as well. So it's something where you may, as you look at it on paper versus what we're able to actually do in-house, you may be able to find a few savings as far as how many people we would need, but we're going to need all the drivers, and we'd have to recruit and retain those drivers, and we'd have to pay them pretty competitively. And that's something, one of the big cost changes for this raise is to raise the bus driver rates, I think, to raise them about $2 an hour to still keep them. They're still going to be $2 an hour lower than what they are in the Kansas City area, but it'll get us closer.
I sort of left the last discussion feeling, and maybe I'm way out in some other field, that this isn't really our focus, and this isn't our business. And I mean, we need to focus on what we do well, and this is just kind of an idea of something we could do, but we're reconsidering it now, or?
Well, I brought it up because I think it was worth talking about and worth, sort of reminding people what the savings were. I agree. Ideally, this is not the thing we want to do. The feeling that I left with was, all of you guys were saying this is a real hassle. We do this is a real hassle, and I appreciate that. But given our budget situation, and if we could shift some money into, shift around the money and free up some money for general expenses, I think it's worth talking about, considering.
And I think it's worthwhile to also point out, though, that there is a lot of pressure on that capital budget. And so I think we would have to really really look at that secondary study and have the bond take over some of those pressing issues, because certainly we cannot afford to do this, take the pressure off for our tradespeople, and simultaneously buy a facility, which is something we need to do. So it would obviously have to be really well planned and well executed, and isn't something we're capable of at the moment, though we are capable of, at the moment, of taking some pressure off of the general fund budget by using capital dollars for some of those more flexible things like paying tradespeople currently. And I think that's a really good idea, so I appreciate that has already happened.
But yeah, that's the discussion we would have to have, because
Sure.
It does alter the capital outlay priorities, or maybe it moves some down. Maybe this gets built into our thinking about the next bond. So, we're not talking about doing this tomorrow, but I think this is worth and why. Partly, I'm asking the question: how long does it take to sort of plan something like this and transition, if we decided to go that way?
But correct me if my memory is not correct about this, but I was left with the impression after our last discussion that we could realize the almost equal amount of savings out of general fund just by transferring our tradespeople over to the capital fund.
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
and there's with the flexibility that we have with how we pay employees, you could have up to around $2.9 million.
So we could go
freed up.
more than
We
the
could go more.
$600,000 that we're planning to do now. We could go even beyond that if we had room in the capital outlay budget to do that.
Yeah, and it's just a scary venture.
Right. And then the other piece of that would be the discussion about warehouse space. is it our anticipation that once we have that issue solved, that we will be saving some additional money in bulk purchasing? And do we have an idea of what that might look like? I'm looking at Paula in the back of the room.
We do. We have ideas around that. I don't think we have
Firm numbers.
Firm numbers as to what that would look like. Obviously we quit paying the lease, which I think was about $100,000. So that's it's general fund expense that's no longer there. But then as far as additional bulk purchasing and things of that nature, we haven't explored it, all the different things that could come with it.
And you kind of touched on the warehouse space, and I'm up to speed on that because I'm on the facilities committee. But did you all catch his comment about the warehouse lease and the fact that they basically have the ability to kind of kick us out at any moment that they should choose to? So my feeling about it is I would really like to focus our capital investment on solving that problem, and so I'm hesitant about going a different direction on the transportation issue now because of that. Because that is, well, I know, but just it's going to take us the better part of a year and a half to solve that problem.
It wouldn't. Fall of 2018 would be the absolute earliest that we'd be able to do that. So you're looking 2 full school years out at the earliest, and I would venture to say I'd probably be pushing that a little, and I would give us 3 just to get our feet underneath us. It's a big operation that we haven't done, so it's biting off a lot, and
we might have a bond issue that we'll be dealing with at that time, too. Chris, you had your hand up.
Just a quick one. Have we revisited the cost savings of possibly housing the buses on a possible new facility site? I remember some small amount of savings mentioned there.
We have, they've talked anywhere between 1% and 2% on the total contract. So, that, how we have left it in the contract for now is that we would renegotiate that when the time came. So once we have a facility and have the ability to do it, we will re-engage First Student in the conversation of, okay, what would it really look like if we had your buses on our site and your offices on our site? And we anticipate that to be at least $100,000, but I think there's a lot of things to think about there within that, because it's not just they're receiving savings on a lot of things. We're taking care of the offices, we're paying for the bills, utility bills. We have the site and the work that would, because they're going to be tearing up, the drive, and who's paying for all that. So that's part of the whole. It's not as clear to say it's going to be X amount. I think it's another contract.
So I don't want to lose my reputation for getting efficient meetings done, which I had earlier today. So I am going to go ahead and call for the public comment. Matthew Hall, thank you for waiting through our entire meeting. You have 3 minutes to share your thoughts with the board. And I'll hold you to it.
I'll try to be quick. Guys, my name's Matt Hall. I'm a resident of Lawrence. My daughter goes to Central Middle School. And I'm also a business agent and secretary-treasurer for Teamsters Local 696. Teamsters are the union that represents drivers throughout the whole northern half of the state of Kansas. We represent the drivers and monitors here for First Student in Lawrence as well. I just wanted to make some public comments on the school transportation budget that you guys have forward in front of you. We have a local contract with First Student that we negotiate every 3 years to 5 years. In that, we negotiate wages, increased safety, a grievance procedure, seniority, things that increase the quality of life for the drivers and the monitors here in Lawrence. We also have a nationwide contract with First Student. The International negotiates that gives us nationwide leverage, it gives us nationwide FMLA protections, and a nationwide voice as well. This is important. What the increases in here is important because right now Lawrence is, like the gentleman said, $2 or more less than the surrounding school districts. The cost of living, as you guys probably know, in Lawrence is one of the highest in the state. So we're paying drivers $12 an hour to start out in one of the highest cost of living areas in the state of Kansas. The First Student has a problem and troubles keeping drivers and retaining drivers for that reason. When we negotiate with those wages, and we negotiate with the money you guys set aside for that. I wanted to address also some of the talk and theories about bringing it in-house. And I understand you guys are in a tough position with the legislature. I understand the legislature makes your guys' job as a school board harder and harder every single year with the games they're playing and the cuts they've done. What it would mean going in district to our drivers is they would lose their union contract. Since First Student's a private employer, they're negotiated under National Labor Relations Act. If they went in-house to a school district, they would no longer be able to be negotiated and represented under National Labor Relations Act. The state law PIRA would allow us to organize and represent them, but PIRA is an opt-in law. The school board would have to opt in and allow us to organize them, which Wyandotte County just opted out of PIRA. Franklin County, we tried getting them organized. They would not opt into PIRA. So that gives us kind of pause for concern, and that's something we would ask you guys to consider and to think about when you're making these decisions. A union contract is not just about wages. It's about increasing their quality of life, as I said before. It's about seniority. It's about giving them a voice and making sure they have a say in their work. Thank you guys for your time. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more discussion, or is someone ready to make a motion?
I don't want to cut off discussion, but I'll make the motion if we're ready. I move the Board of Education approve a new 5-year contract with First Student for student transportation services as set forth in the board enclosure.
Okay, I have a motion. A second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Janice? Yes.
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 Okay. And that is our meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we are adjourned. Are all in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned.